Hello, GED students. Here I go combining skills again. We've got this. So first example, the slope of a line is given by the expression y2 minus y1, or sometimes we call that the change in y, over the quantity of x2 minus x1, or the change in the x's. Which 2 points lie on a line with an undefined slope? Okay, so a couple of things I'm giving you. The first is an expression that represents the slope of a line. The slope of a line is given by this expression. So we can use this expression to find slope. Now, but then they ask us really interesting question. They don't ask us to find a slope given 2 points. Instead, they ask us to choose 2 points that lie on a line with undefined slope. Now, you might say, Kate, we've talked about undefined expressions, but we haven't talked about undefined slope. Well, we just said that this expression gives us slope. And look what kind of an expression it is. Do you see that it's a rational expression? That just means we have a fraction here. We know that there's something we can't do with fractions, or they leave the expression undefined. We can't divide by 0. And so what's going to make this expression undefined? Well, it's going to be if the bottom, the denominator of the fraction, turns into 0. So if the second x minus the first x give you 0, then this whole thing is going to be undefined. Now, you might say, why are you just looking at the bottom? Because that's the only part that affects it being undefined. So I'm just going to ignore the top. All right. So let's see. Let's look at our x's. Now, in order to do this problem, though, you need to know that these points, they're written x, comma, y. So the first number is the x. Like in this point 7. In this point 4. So if I were to plug the x's in here, the second x would be 4 minus the first x would be 7. That would not give me 0, and that gives me -3. And so that first one, a, is not going to give me an undefined slope. Let's look at the next guy. So a is ruled out. What if I did, oh, look again, 4, I should say, minus 7. It really doesn't actually matter what order you go in, but it usually helps students if I call this one 0.2 and this one 0.1. So the second x, I'm taking the second x, 4, minus the first x, 7. So 4 minus 7 is -3. Again, it's not that guy. Okay. Now, careful with C. The first x here is 5. Then a lot of students will tell me this gives them 0. But if I take 5, that second x, and from it I subtract, this is not 5, this is -5. So subtract -5. And 5 minus -5, well, probably the easier way to think about subtracting a negative, or the opposite of negative, is as addition. So 5 plus 5 is 10, not 0. So I did C to trick you, watch out. But take a look at D. On D, we have the exact same x value. Well, of course, if you have 5 and you take away that same amount, 5, it will give you 0. And so if I were to plug this point in, the entire expression would be undefined. Now, you might say, oh, Kate, I don't know. I don't like this ninja nonsense that you did with just looking at the bottom. Okay, that's fine. Let's check by plugging into this whole expression. So the change in y's means take the second y and subtract the first y from that to see how much my y is changed. And then we'll do the same thing with our x's. And I'll go real slow this time. If this is the first point, 5, 7, then this will be the first x. And this will be the second. I was about to screw it up. This will be the first y. And then 5, 4 is the second point. So this will be the second x. And this will be the second y. And now we'll plug these values in. We're supposed to start with the second y. See it? Y2. So the second point's y is 4, so I'll plug in 4 on the top. And from that, I'm supposed to subtract the first y. Okay, well, the first y was a 7. I'll put 7 on the top. Oh, I didn't leave myself room. 4 minus 7. And then that whole thing is going to be divided by the second x. The second x was 5. Minus the first x. The first x is also 5. And then we see 4 minus 7 up top leaves us with negative 3. Yes, but negative 3 over 0 or divided by 0. We're not allowed to divide by 0. And so that is what makes this expression undefined. Basically, there's no answer. So I did it the short way. I did it the long way. Either way, correct answer here. That's D. All right, let's look at the next example. Which values of the variables this time, would make the expression the square root of b squared minus 4ac undefined in the real numbers? There I go, mixing up evaluation with undefined expressions again. But take a look. Once again, I have this expression, and I'm talking which values of the variable would leave the expression undefined. Now, careful. Getting undefined expressions is based on what type of expression you have. In the last example, we had a fraction. It was a rational expression. In this example, we have a square root. We can take the square root of 0. So don't think it's always about 0, right? Square root of 0 is 0. That's not undefined. That has an answer. But there is something we can't take the square root of, at least not in the real numbers as we call them, the only ones we're working with for the GED. Like, we can take the square root of 1, it's 1. We can take the square root of 0, but think of a number we can't take the square root of. -1. There is no number that if I square it would give me -1. Therefore, I cannot take the square root of -1. All that to say is, let me say that again. Wow. I say all of that just to help you remember that we cannot take the square root of a negative. So if I plug in these values, a is 2, b is -6, and c is 3, and it gives me an expression where they're trying to tell me to take the square root of a negative, well, then it will be undefined. There'll be no real answer for it. So let's plug into this expression here, b squared minus 4ac. Okay, so now I'll be advising you here that the main thing you need to watch out for is when you square negatives. This is what most of you guys do wrong. It's probably what you did wrong if you're here on this video with me. When you go to do b squared, I'm going to get red just so you can see how wrong this is. Do not just go -b squared. I just had another YouTube comment with another person telling me the calculator doesn't work because they did it that way. Or I should say -6 squared. And then it didn't work. You can't just slap a negative in front if it's a square. You have got to use parentheses. So let's erase this -6 squared. You have to put the negative number into parentheses like this, -6, and then close the parentheses before you square it, or you're not going to be including the negative in the squaring process. So -6 squared, and then I have my -4, and then my a is 2, and my c is 3. My square root needs to be longer. Okay, so let's do this. The square of -6, -6 times -6 is 36, and that's all going to be -4 times 2 is 8, and 8 times 3 is 24. And 36 minus 24 is 12. Now that might be an ugly square root to take the square root of 12, but it's still possible. There's still a real answer for it because 12 is positive. And so A is not going to work. It has a real answer. It is not negative. It is not undefined, and so I'm going to rule it out. Okay, next one. Again, we're going to do b squared minus 4ac, and I'm testing these a, b's, and c's to see which one gives me an undefined expression. So plugging in the b, that's 3, and I'm squaring it. It really doesn't matter if I use the parentheses when it's a positive number, but it's just a good habit to have since it matters so much when it's negative. And then minus 4, my a value here is negative 2. My c value here is 6. Okay, so I'm going to work inside that radical first. 3 squared is 9. And then take a look here. Do you see how I have that minus there and then I have another negative there? Yeah, a negative times a negative is a positive, so you're going to end up with a plus. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 6 is 48. And you can see that when I do 9 plus 48, of course, I do end up with a positive number. And so, yeah, it might be ugly, but it's not undefined. That's the square root of a positive number, totally legal. So B is not the correct answer either. Let's test C. So square root of b squared minus 4ac. Let's see. B in this case is 3, so I'm going to square 3. Minus 4 times a is 2. C is 6. Three squared is 9, and from that, just one minus sign, so it's still going to be minus 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 6 is 48. Oh, there it is, guys. There it is. Oh, do you see it? 9. I only have 9, and from that, I'm going to take away 48. I don't even have to do the math to say, oh my gosh, that's going to give me a negative answer. It's going to ask me to take the square root of a negative something, and it doesn't even matter what the something is. You can't take a square root of a negative in the real numbers, and so this sucker would be undefined, or as you guys think of it, no real answer to that. All right, I know I took a while, went kind of slow on these, but I really would like you to understand the skills of undefined expressions and the skill of evaluating. Oh, I love to combo stuff. All right, you guys, happy learning.